Good morning. Thank you for sharing your morning with me. Um, as Andrea had said, the medical advice is this is not to be considered medical advice, and I have to put the caveat, this is not to be considered legal advice, but I'm sharing with you the experience and knowledge of having about 25 years working in college disability services with a variety of students with a variety of disabilities, and hopefully giving you some guidance to take with you as you look at colleges and consider your options and how to make that decision. The National Center for College Students with Disabilities is a federally funded center through the Department of Education and also the Rehabilitation Services Administration. We work to provide students with disabilities, their family or support persons, educators and staff, both K-12 and post-secondary, and state and Veterans Administration vocational rehabilitation systems, organizations in the community, transition supporters. Basically, we'll provide answers to anybody about any type of disability going to any type of post-secondary education or training. That's the sum of it all. We provide technical assistance. We are putting out tip sheets, toolkits, things for students to consider, things for teachers to consider. We're actually going to be launching a faculty training program. We have, and this might be of interest to any of you who are still looking for a college, we have the CEDAR database, which provides information about the Disability Services Office at 3,935, something like that, colleges and universities across the United States. It gives you the contact information, their webpage. We also have, and this is the other thing that's very important, and I want students to hear about it, is the DREAM student group. It's disability rights, education, activism, and mentoring. And that is a by disabled students for disabled students group. It is online, but we also have, and I just found out, it's 63 campus affiliate student organizations. So if you are attending a college or you get to a college and you want a DREAM affiliate, you can actually work with your campus student activities board to create a student organization that is affiliated with DREAM. So those are just some things about the National Center for College Students with Disabilities. That QR code in the corner will take you right to our website where all of this information is also posted. So what are we going to do today? Well, hopefully I'm going to share with you information that will help you and guide you in making decisions for your next steps. We're going to talk about disability and activities of daily living, ADLs, and that's important because the changes that occur between high school and college make some changes in how we look at disability. I'm going to explain what College Disability Services is, and then the process for requesting accommodations. How do you identify barriers that you might have? Types of accommodations to think about requesting, and what to do if the accommodations are not working. Every disability service provider that I know of wants the accommodations to be working, but sometimes it's not the right accommodation. And what's the process to remediate that? And then I'm going to share out some resources, especially vocational rehabilitation, which is an often overlooked resource, and then some community organizations that you may already know about, but I can't say enough good things about how they can help support college students going off to college and advocating for themselves. So what is a disability? A disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more activities of daily living. A person can also be protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, if they have a record or a history of such an impairment, such as cancer that is in remission, or substance use disorder that the person is in treatment for and not actively using. Or a person is also protected by the ADA if they are perceived by others as having such an impairment, such as facial disfiguration or burn scars. They may not have accommodations provided because they don't have a barrier, but that non-discrimination clause of the ADA comes into effect and helps protect that person from that discrimination. And this information is all on the ada.gov. website. That's the ADA Network website. It is the federal website for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Great resources if you ever have to look up something related to the ADA. I can't say enough good things about that website either. But as you saw in the previous slide, there was an image of a wheelchair, the accessibility feature for parking. And oftentimes people forget that disability is not just those physical disabilities that we see, a person using a mobility device, somebody who's blind using a white cane or a guide dog, but it's also, and more importantly at the colleges, it's the non-visible disabilities. It's the students who have learning disabilities. It's the students who have medical conditions. It's the students who have mental health conditions. The number one category that almost every college disability service provider is seeing increasing are the non-visible, including mental health conditions, ADHD, and we're seeing an increase, especially after COVID, of medical conditions that are coming onto our campuses and sometimes struggling because I didn't know about the Disability Services Office and then having to start that process. But hopefully this information today will guide you to connecting with your college's Disability Service Office to begin the process for requesting accommodations. So what are activities of daily living? I like to say it's walking, talking, eating, sleeping, breathing, thinking, concentrating. As you can see, it's the things that we do every day. Movement, cognitive functions, sensory functions, tasks like working, reading, learning, which is what is supposed to happen in college, is some learning. But important to this conversation this morning is the operation of major bodily functions like circulation, reproduction, and individual organ systems. We all know gastrointestinal is an organ system, and if you have enteral or parenteral nutritional systems in place, that means your gastrointestinal system is affected. It may not affect you in most of your daily activity, or it may affect you in more activities than other people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I just wanted to lay the groundwork as to why we would look at working with a student who has a medical condition, such as a gastrointestinal medical health condition, because that could impact you, maybe not so much in the classroom, but maybe in the residence halls. And we'll talk about where these impacts may occur so you can start thinking about what you want to ask for accommodations. So the differences between high school and college. And just so you know, the picture on the right-hand side is not of any college that I've worked at, because that's just too new. I've worked at some older schools that had older buildings, loved the historical buildings, but this is just an image of a large glass encased hall. So higher education, we're going to speak specifically about higher education. There's also post-secondary training that is available. Sometimes that's provided at career centers, and those would also be covered under the ADA in Section 504 if they receive federal funding. But I'm going to focus on community colleges, which are typically two-year colleges, some of which have dorms, and four-year schools, such as a university or even a college that has a four-year degree program. Many of those have on-campus living requirements, which may be the environment that is impacted. Additionally, some of the colleges or the universities will have family living units or apartments for people who have children. And I always like to remind people that there are online programs, even at brick and mortar schools. They may have an online program. The community college I just left has their business program is fully online and it's fully in person. So you can take classes online and complete your business degree, your associate's degree, without ever stepping foot on campus. So there are things to think about when you're looking at your colleges. The nice thing about online programs is most of them are asynchronous, which means it works around your schedule. You log in and you do the homework on your time. You want to check if the program that you're looking at a school that's online is asynchronous or synchronous. Synchronous means you log in at class time and you participate in the class live, but it's over the airwaves as opposed to sitting in a classroom. And I want to make sure that we touch on the graduate programs for master's and doctoral degrees. Looking at graduate student housing, oftentimes graduate students are thought of as no longer having a disability, but that's not true. And so I always want to make sure that we include graduate students in our discussions. So what are the differences? Well, there's high school, and if you have an IDEA, an IEP, or a 504 plan, those are the laws that are required under the high school, because that's free and appropriate education. Under college, last time I checked, college was not really free. You kind of have to pay for it. And there's an application process and an admissions process for colleges. Even open enrollment, you still have to apply. You still have to have a high school diploma or college or a GED, an equivalency diploma to attend. But the one thing that is different is the 504 is subpart E, which means there's some changes in how the law is applied. And the Fair Housing Act also applies for the housing that occurs on the campus. One of the questions is, does this include the culinary school? It would include culinary school if it is anybody can apply and they accept people from the community. It is likely private, which would make it a Title III ADA, which is public accommodation. If it is a state or local government, so if it's a state culinary school, so a culinary school at a community college, it's a program within the community college. That community college is probably a 2-year public institution, so Title II of the ADA would apply. If that culinary school accepts $1 of federal funds, it triggers the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which requires non-discrimination in all programs, services, and activities. So if that culinary school receives federal financial aid, then there's also protections from 504. Thank you for that question. The difference between high school and college is that high school focuses on success. The federal government told the high schools, hey, we have a whole group of students who are not graduating with a diploma. You need to change how you approach their services so that they will graduate, because it's free and appropriate education. And so that means they can modify the curriculum. If a student is unable to write the 10-page essay for their English class, they might only be assigned 2 pages. Or if they're taking tests and they really struggle with test taking, their modification might be they only have 2 choices, A and B, to choose from rather than 4 choices everyone else gets, A, B, C, and D. Or they might be able to retake the test as many times as possible. Or they might have reduced number of questions on the test. That's the high school modifications for success. In college, the degrees that colleges grant students after they've earned that diploma signify to the federal government, to our accreditors, and to the employers that require a college degree that students have met X, Y, and Z criteria. That means we cannot modify the essential learning objectives when we provide the accommodations. So a student who may struggle with writing that paper, one of the accommodations may be that they actually use dictation software so they can write their paper without the struggle between getting what they're thinking about to their fingertips as they type their paper. I think the next part of the differences between high school and college are going to be the most important, and hopefully I clarify this information. At the high school, they are required to identify a student with a disability. So if a student's struggling, the high school is required to do an assessment to see if the student has a disability and then implement the 504 plan or the IEP. At the college, the student is now responsible to identify that they need accommodations and provide that documentation. The college is not required to provide any sort of assessment for a student's disability identity. I like to call it the summer of magic. So if you're a student who's going to graduate in May, you have June, July, and a little bit of August to prepare for how are you going to self-identify at the college. It's a summer of magic. It just is supposed to somehow magically happen that students become their own self-advocate. Parents during the K-12 years have been the advocates, and they've been advocating for the necessary accommodations and services for their student at the high school. At the college, it's now the student's responsibility, and the student is protected by FERPA. It's the Federal Educational Right to Privacy Act, which says colleges cannot share without a signed FERPA release any information about an individual who is enrolled as a student to any third party. Within disability services, even with that signed FERPA release, we really want to hear from the student, because I don't know if you all have played the game telephone, where you say one thing to the front person in the line and as it goes back, and how does it end up at the last person in the line? Usually not as clear or accurate as the first person got the message, right? Because we all understand and interpret as we're hearing the message. And so even with a signed FERPA release, hearing from the student is so important, because there are going to be things that the students can be able to share about. When did they talk to the teacher about that accommodation? Oh, it was right after class as they were packing up and leaving for the next class. Then we can help that student identify ways to communicate with the teacher in a more effective manner. So those are some of the differences, but I'd say the biggest difference that affects a lot of students is that they are now in the driver's seat. And so for those students that are joining us today, or their family or support members that are helping them, if we can begin before they graduate high school, the conversations about how do you talk about your disability, how do you discuss the accommodations you need, so that the student is more confident and able to approach that conversation, that's going to serve them very well, not only in college, but the reason most students get a college degree is so that they can go to work. At work, it is up to the employee to request the accommodation either from their supervisor or from the Human Resources Office. And there is no intermediary like a Disability Services Office at the college, or like the special educators at the high school. So one of the big changes that I think will affect is that whole concept of living on your own. Many times students who have medical conditions have had a lot of support from their family members, making sure that their medical needs are taken care of or met. And suddenly they're going off to college and they have to be cognizant of what their medical needs are and how are they going to get those met in this new environment. The other thing that affects many students with any of the medical conditions that I've worked with are the things like you're sharing a space with another student. How does that affect your condition, or how does your condition affect that shared space? Think about roommate or roommates. Some rooms are trimates, meaning there's 3 people in a room as opposed to just 2. Sometimes it's 4 people in a room. It's a dorm room, which is smaller, much smaller. There's almost always shared bathrooms. And then if you're living on campus, there's usually dining services that's required as part of the residential package. So you pay for room and board. I just looked at a university, and their room and board was $7,935 per semester. And that was for a room similar to this one and dining services at the lowest level, which is 2 meals a day for 6 days a week. So you have to look at that and think about, what is it that I can I can work with, or what am I going to need that's not available in this setting? The College Disability Services Office is the office that is established by the campus to determine and facilitate non-discrimination across the campus, but more importantly for the individual student, the accommodations they need in order to access and enjoy all programs, services, and activities of that campus. How do you find them? There is no standard disability services office at colleges. That's the difficulty. I recommend you go to the college website and you search disability, disability services, accessibility, access services. And if you can't find anything at all, look for the ADA coordinator and see if you can find that person and ask them, how do you get a hold of the disability services office on campus? Mostly, if you search disability, disability services, or accessibility, it will connect you, and the first 3 links will be the disability services office. Most colleges are now using an online application, which makes it a lot easier. And they'll let you upload your documentation within that system or by emailing it to them. So you want to look at their website, find out what the process is for requesting accommodations, find out what types of accommodations are offered. I want to emphasize, when you upload that documentation, it goes to disability services. You do not have to take that documentation to the faculty in order to prove your accommodation. That is one of the things that disability services is there for, is to work with the students to advocate for those accommodations. And that's usually through a letter of accommodation that either the student gets and presents to the faculty, so there's no diagnosis on there, or the student requests from disability services, and disability services will send that letter out directly to the faculty, listing the accommodations that are necessary. The Disability Service Office also works with the other campus units like housing and dining, student organizations. That's one of the things that students with disabilities want to participate in, but don't really understand where they might need an accommodation for a student activity or a student organization that they want to join. And I will touch on it towards the end. One thing I want to emphasize is accommodations will also apply for student internships or student clinical experiences if you're in a medical health professional program, and student employment. So we'll touch on that in a little bit, but there's lots of ways that disability services will be working with the student and the entire campus. So what's the process for requesting accommodations? Well, first of all, I already said you don't give your documentation to the faculty, so you're not starting with the faculty. You're going to start with the Office of Disability Services. I've just given an example here of Northern Arizona University's website. So under student accommodations, you would click the student eligibility process. There's a form that you fill out online, and then how you upload your documentation. They also have all these other information like the resources that are available. Northern Arizona University has a student login to a program where the student can actually select which accommodations they've been approved for and which teachers they want to receive the letter with those accommodations on. And so you would log in, and that's how you would select it and send it off, and your teachers would get the letter from Disability Services. You'll find on disability service websites the information about the process, documentation requirements. Most campuses are using an online application. Most importantly is the contact information. If you don't see an online application, send them an email. Say, I'm interested in this college. I have some medical conditions. I'm looking for some accommodations. What are the steps I need to take to get registered with disability services? And they will explain that to you. I will also say, give them time. The fall semester, the beginning of the fall semester is very busy for college disability services, but don't let it drag on. I tell our students, if you sent an email to a faculty member and you have not heard back within 1 week, send a follow-up. Same thing with disability services. If you've sent the disability services an email, give them a week to respond and then follow up. If it's more urgent, then give them a call and leave a voicemail. So the steps are, if you're interested in a college, always contact Disability Services to see if they would meet with you if you come for a campus tour or the admissions process, just so that you can get a feel for disability services, or even talk about what are some common accommodations that have been provided for students with similar conditions as the one that you have. Once you determine the college that you're going to attend, apply. I always, when way back in the day, when I applied for college, I had three. I had my top and then I had my two backups, just because I didn't know if I was going to get in. If you have the opportunity to tour the campus, I suggest that any student with a disability tour the campus when classes are in session, so you can get a feel for it. My sister chose a very large public university. I chose a very small public university because we're two different people. She's an extrovert, I'm an introvert. I wanted to make sure that I was at a campus where I felt connected to the campus. My sister wanted a campus where she could get to meet as many people as possible and participate in all different activities and organizations. So look at the college as a whole to look at what it is you want for your major, for the type of environment you want to be at, and then go and tour it. Talk to disability services. Some will talk to students prior to their application. When I was in disability services, I would talk to students who were thinking about coming to the campus. Others just don't have staff to do anything for extra students other than the ones they're currently working with, but they will refer to places on the website you might not have seen for more information, or they may answer a question that you specifically have in an email back. When you apply, find out if you have to take any placement tests, if you have to meet with an advisor, do a new student orientation. You can request accommodations for all of those things because those are all activities of the college. Submit your documentation and apply to disability services. I can't emphasize this enough, as early as possible. So when you're applying for, let's say, a four-year university and it has a residential component, your application usually goes in the fall before you're going to be graduating high school and going off to college, by January usually. And then you have to apply for housing, and housing slots get taken up very quickly. And so what you need for housing requests needs to be submitted early so that there's still available rooms that would meet your need. Meet with the disability services staff to request the accommodations. And remember, it's not just for your classes, it's also for housing, dining, campus activities, student employment. If you know you're going to have an internship or clinical experience, make sure you have that conversation with the disability services about how do we look at these accommodations in this environment? And then whatever their procedure is for requesting the letters of accommodation and sending those out to the faculty, you're going to follow that. The most important, if you remember nothing else from this presentation, please remember, if you have any issues or concerns with your accommodations, or let's say the faculty says, I don't know about that accommodation, inform disability services right away. Don't fight with the teacher, don't argue, because they're your instructor. It's the disability services role to negotiate and navigate those accommodations with the faculty. And if we don't know that there's a problem, we can't solve it. Remember, recognize what are the barriers in those different settings. Know that so that you can have that conversation with disability services. And then think about what accommodations have worked for you, or you're thinking, I've never done an internship before. I don't know what accommodations I need. I've never done a lab class. I don't know what accommodations I need, but I'm going to be in biology 1, biology 2, chemistry. And these are the things I'm concerned about. Can we address those with accommodations? And that's the conversation. That's the interactive dialogue that disability services is supposed to have with students when they request accommodations. Discuss how those barriers might affect you and figure out how to explain that to others, and do that with the people who have been supporting you throughout your previous experience in the educational system. It could be family, it could be friends, it could be a special ed teacher or your high school guidance counselor who really knows you best. Have a conversation with them about, can you help me discuss how my disability impacts me and how the accommodations help me, so that I'm able to have that conversation when I go to college. The support people can also assist the student to find campus and community supports. And this is very important when I work with students with medical conditions, especially because most colleges, especially community colleges, don't have medical services. So they don't have a health service. They don't even have a nurse on staff. So finding out what is available in the community that you'll be attending school in is very important. And then how do you prepare your medical records so that you have those when you have an emergency, if an emergency was to arise? We certainly hope no emergency arises, but that's something that having that knowledge and knowing how to talk about it, especially with medical providers, is so important. And then if your support person can help practice with you, but not as the parent who's done all the advocacy, but how do you help explain your condition to somebody who has never experienced a student with that condition? While we have a lot of students with various conditions, I'm not sure that there's any service provider who has worked with a student with every single medical condition that is out there. But we want to ask questions, so be ready for questions. When I met students with conditions that I wasn't sure about and I hadn't experienced before, I would ask about, well, what about this environment? Because I know the environment. So you have a lab class and it's in the cadaver lab. If you have enteral feeding that's continuous pump and you have that with you, how will that affect you in this environment? Is there anything that we need to be considering for an accommodation in that environment? So, do you have any concerns? And then we may even, if you have concerns, we may even arrange a meeting with the faculty for that class to have further conversations with disability services there to help navigate that, because I want to know what's available, what are some of the concerns from both the student and the faculty, and then figure out how we're going to problem solve and provide the accommodations for the student to participate in the class. And then one of the things that I really appreciate is when the support person has helped the student come up with questions to ask the disability services, because the family member, and I'm going to use the family member because that's often the person who does the advocacy within the K-12 setting, the family member has advocated for that individual in a learning environment for 12 years and will understand, well, you want to make sure you understand this setting or this setting, but it's up to the student to ask that, and they might not know the advocacy that was taken with the high school in order for the student to complete something. So working together to come up with questions to ask disability services is very important. When you think about the barriers, they have to be barriers that are directly related to the condition or the disability and how it affects you in the activities of daily living. In class, is there a need because of the routine for the nutritional process that 8 o'clock classes are just never going to work for you? That's something that you want to know about and talk to the disability services about. Can I have priority registration so the class at 10 o'clock doesn't get filled up because upperclassmen fill it up when I need it because I can't do the 8 o'clock section? Those types of things. Even if there's a concern about What if I need to use the bathroom because of my medical condition while we're in the middle of class? What do I do? And that's where talking to disability services about, can I have the ability to leave class to take care of my personal needs and come back to class? So what we generally call is a momentarily leave class to alleviate the impact of the condition, accommodation. To get up, go use the restroom, go, if you have an ostomy bag and you're thinking, oh, I think it just slipped, you need to take care of that. And so that would be the accommodation. There are some situations where the accommodation may not be appropriate. So the accommodation you requested may not be appropriate given the essential learning objectives, but that's where you ask for the institution to determine if it's appropriate. And if not, what are the alternatives? For example, if a student has a medical condition that causes occasional absences, but they're in a lab setting, so they have a biology lab, but they end up missing biology lab on Monday, which is their assigned day, could the disability services work with the teacher so that they can actually attend lab on Wednesday when the other section is being held? That ability, if they're impacted on Monday, to then attend the Wednesday lab, if there's one available, that could be considered an accommodation. And that would be something that disability services could help with. You want to think about the performance classes. You know, not everyone wants to be a scientist. There are actors and artists. Thinking about, well, you're in the performance class where you're learning fight skills, how to fight as an actor. That's a lot of movement. Are there any concerns that you have in that environment? Think about the housing. Think about dining. So if you're living on campus and you have room and board, but there is no, if you are NPO, nothing by mouth, and nothing can pass those lips, can you request a waiver of the dining charges so that you're not being charged for something you're never going to use? You can actually inquire, is it possible for disability services to work with dining services to allow you to enter the dining hall with your friends or your suite mates or your floor mates, because that's part of the engagement with the campus, or it could be part of a requirement of a living learning community. Let's say you're a foreign language major and you're living in the foreign language house, and they require attendance at dinners where everyone's speaking in their language. So if you're taking Spanish as your foreign language, you're engaging with others who are Spanish speaking, and your entire dinner is spent in that language. It's part of that immersion. You still need to be part of that immersion, but there is no way that you can have anything by mouth. And so working with disability services so that they can work with dining services so that you can still enter and partake in the program, but not have the dining charges. So those are things just to think about. Internships. The college is responsible to ensure that the internship is accessible. Many times that's in collaboration with the major teacher for the internship and with the internship site, usually with human resources. Clinicals, same thing. So if you're in a medical field, you'll have to do clinical experiences, thinking about the accommodations that you might need while working on the floor or while working in a business setting at a computer. Think about what you might need for accommodations. What barriers might you have? Student employment, the accommodations are a little bit different because it's employment and it may come through HR, but HR may also ask disability services to work with them on the accommodations for student employment. But if you're on campus and you want to work on campus, you can apply for a student employment job. Working in the library is a really good way because you're doing a lot of book work. And when there's downtime, most of the students I know have library jobs are studying. So just sharing that. If you have walking or transportation barriers, think about that. If the campus is very large and covers about 18 square miles, and you have class on one side of the campus and then you have to get to the other side, what are your options and what do you need? And most importantly, remember, we're here for the Oley Foundation, which is for the nutritional impacts that students may have because of medical conditions. But there's also mental health a diagnosed mental health condition can rise to a level of disability, such as PTSD, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, any physical or other conditions, physical disabilities, learning disabilities, those are other accommodations. So you might be receiving accommodations for nutritional impacts, and you might also receive accommodations for generalized anxiety disorder and maybe a learning disability. All of those can come together. Hearing, vision, ADHD, autism. You want to have all that information and you want to have records of all of those diagnoses so you can share that with disability services and talk about what the barriers are that you're going to have in different environments and the accommodations that will work for you. Specifically for this presentation, you want to think about what do you need to manage the condition? What nutritional supplies? How are you going to get them? How are you going to receive them? Do you have to make them up? Do they have to be stored in a refrigerator? Most dorms have a small dorm-sized refrigerator that's shared between 2 roommates. Well, how does that affect your storage of your medical nutritional needs? Do you have an aseptic or a sterile process for your nutritional needs? How is that going to be impacted if you're sharing a room with somebody? And then assistance, if your support person has been providing this assistance or the school nurse has been providing the assistance with the nutritional process when you need to have the food delivered, are you going to be able to learn to do that individually yourself, or will you need assistance with it, which the college will not provide, but they can work with you to allow that medical provider, nurse, personal care assistant to come in and assist you with that? And then how does the condition actually affect you? Do you need instant access to the bathroom because of the medical condition, which means a shared bathroom might be difficult? Do you need to rinse out and dry all of the equipment that you're using? Is it a lengthy routine to do the feeding? Is it at night and the pump is noisy and there's lights? Will that affect how your room is used? And then most importantly, any need for a medical waste receptacle. So the janitors at the college we don't want them to get injured. So if you're using needles, you can request a sharps container. But if you have other medical waste, such as from an ostomy, being able to dispose of that in a medical waste process, you can work with the campus health and safety officer, or if there's a medical health services office, they will help you with that. If you're not sure, ask disability services, explain the situation and say, how do we manage this in the residence hall? I don't know who I need to talk to, but can you work on this for me? And that's what we do. So I'm running out of time, and I've talked a little bit about the accommodations that you can talk about. I want to answer these 2 questions. So one of the questions is running TPN in a lab for college, and that's where talking about the need to run the TPN and what might be some considerations or some concerns. So think about how that might impact you and then how you can ask for or advocate for a specific accommodation. And it may be that the accommodation can be provided at that time, or they may have to research a little more and talk to the department, because the department may have specific requirements. And those are requirements that are not from the college itself, but it could be from best practices from the National Science Foundation sort of thing. And while we're talking about it, think about if you're going into the sciences, especially if you're doing hard sciences like geology or chemistry, or botany, you will likely have classes that are in the field. So think about, if I have to go out and we're spending 3 days in the field, how do I manage my feeding pump? How do I manage keeping my nutritional my nutritional materials cold? How do we run my pump? Those kinds of things. The next question is, somebody has a daughter who's applying to university and was advised that they will need a neuropsych eval to support accommodations we will be requesting. Is this typical? The neuropsych eval, and I don't know the university and I don't know what their requirements are, but typically the neuropsych eval is specifically for things such as learning disabilities, autism, ADHD, to identify where the disability is. Now, some colleges will accept, and like I said, nothing is standard across colleges. So some colleges require that a neuropsych eval be current within 3 years and have a psychoeducational evaluation of aptitude and achievement. That could be required. You go to the next college and they will take the ETR, or the evaluation from the high school, and review that. So it's just seeing what's needed. But if the accommodations that are being requested are not directly tied to things such as autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, traumatic brain injury, things that would affect the neural processes, I'm not sure why they're asking for a neuropsych eval. If I have a student who has nutritional feeding through a tube, my thinking it'd be, first of all, we need to make sure that the student has access to their tests, that they have extra time in case they have a hiccup in their continuous feed pump. Probably reduce distraction, maybe an individual room, simply because the pump may be creating noise. It may have beeps, things like that. I'm not sure about the neuropsych eval. I think the question to ask the university is, which of the accommodations are you requiring this neuropsych eval for if your student does not have any of the neurological conditions such as learning disability, traumatic brain injury, that they're asking for accommodations. But if they have any of those conditions, then asking for a neuropsych eval is something that colleges and universities can do. And more often than not, you'll see the universities asking for that neuropsych eval, and community colleges will sometimes only require the evaluation from the high school, which includes the evaluation scores and report. The last one, if rooms, so we're talking dorm rooms, if all dorm rooms are suite-based with shared bathroom, i.e. 4 to a suite with 2 bathrooms, have you ever seen the college allow the student to have 1 bathroom and not a roommate, and only 3 to a suite versus 4? And I will have to say, for this individual, it depends. Basically, the answer you'll hear from disability services is it depends. It depends on whether or not the impact of the disability creates that barrier of sharing that bathroom, whether or not an individual bathroom and individual room can be provided elsewhere. So it really depends. And that's where that engaged conversation with disability services, and it will likely include the residential hall director to talk about. But have I seen it? Yes. Is that standard? I would say it really depends on the school, on the setting, on the individual's documented needs. And I would also say it depends on the location, because I'm sure you've all heard there are some locations in the United States where even having the dorms that they have, the colleges are, especially in urban areas, are experiencing a lot of crunch in housing. Either there's no community housing, or there's all the dorms are full and they're placing people into hotels. So it really depends on the location. I can tell you there's a medium-sized university that's outside of Chicago that has a lot of open dorm rooms because they've lost a lot of students. Would they consider working with a student who requested the accommodation just to fill a room? It's possible, and that's where it's worth the conversation. So quickly, in the 2 minutes that remain, if you have a problem with your accommodations, talk to Disability Services. Your college should have a formal grievance process. You can always file a formal grievance process through the school. And at any point, you can file with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, the OCR office. I have the link there in the PowerPoint that takes you to the OCR's website. I always say start with Disability Services because you might get a resolution faster. The Office for Civil Rights, I just saw a case come across that they resolved after 2 years. So start with Disability Services, go through the formal process on campus. You can even try, if your campus has an ombuds person, they're the neutral party who can help explain the processes and policies on the campus. That's another good resource. Always, always, always have a paper trail. Keep notes of who you talk to. If you email, save those emails so you have record of what was said, what was asked for, and how this communication occurred. The additional resources, I can't stress enough, vocational rehabilitation. It is the state agency that is required to provide help for people with disabilities to get and maintain employment. If a person is eligible, they may be able to help with some of the needs for college, including internships and clinical experiences. They can help with that negotiation of accommodations in that work environment that you'll be in with the internship. If you want to find your local vocational rehabilitation office, if you go to the JAN VR list, that's the Job Accommodation Network, which is a great resource for employment accommodations. They have the list and you can find your state and then find their website. Most states have an online application. Independent living centers, especially for students who are going away to campus and they might need some additional peer support. They do information referral, transition to community. They do benefits counseling. So if you're not sure if working the on-campus job is going to affect your Social Security disability income, your local independent living center might be able to tell you that with benefits counseling. Before I finish up here, Accessible College. It is a individual organization who works with people with medical conditions to look at colleges. It's a fee for service, but she does give the first 30 minutes is free. But she also has some resources online that might be of interest to you. She also has a Facebook page, Accessible College Facebook page. Generation Patient is a Facebook and organization that's specifically for students and adults with medical conditions. Final tips: ask questions, research the Disability Services Office, research the college, develop ways to explain the barriers and the accommodations, use resources on and off campus, enjoy college, make friends, create lasting memories, and please, please graduate. That is the most important thing. And if it takes you a little extra time, you can request extra time for your program. So if the program requires that it's completed in 6 years, you can work with Disability Services and the program or the college to extend it maybe another year. So you can have 7 years if you take reduced course load each semester leading through the program. We have a student group, and I've got the QR code up for DREAM, and we talked about that briefly. And I want to say thank you. And if you have a chance to complete the QR code survey there, that's just an evaluation of how I did for my presentation. Our email is nccSD@ahead.org. You can also reach out to me at Jenifer@ahead.org. And I see we have one final question. Okay, so if you have been experiencing discrimination or non-accommodation public or private, K-12 or post-secondary, there's a couple of different resources. One of the resources would be talk to your state's disability rights network. So like I'm here in Ohio, our state organization is Disability Rights Ohio. There's also DREDF, DREDF, Disability Rights Education Defense Fund. I think they're out of California. They have a lot of information, especially about K-12 advocacy. There's also the Coalition for Parents of Exceptional Children, and they have resources. If you want to send me an email, I can go ahead and pull together those links so that you can just click on them. Jenifer with one N, Jenifer at ahead.org. But one of the biggest resources that I share out is Disability Rights Network and connecting with the state's Disability Rights Office to have that conversation, because they can answer those kinds of questions directly. It looks like that's all for the questions, Andrea, and I will stop sharing.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Jenifer. I thought this was amazing. So many great tips. I think some of the things that really stuck out to me is that, you know, if parents or caregivers aren't already, you know, having their child more active in the advocating process, speaking up for themselves in appointments, just so they can get used to it, you know, once they go away to college. And great tips about, you know, when touring the college, reach out to disability services, get involved with them right away, get questions answered, that sort of thing. So great. Thank you so much. Let's see. So as far as events coming up with Oley, we'll be having our September Community Connection on Friday, September 27th. So this Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Great way to connect with others in the nutrition support community, regardless of where you are in your journey. And if you're not already, make sure you're following us on social media to stay up to date on upcoming events. Stay tuned for information on Home Parental Nutrition Awareness Week happening October 13th through the 19th. We have some super great events planned that you won't want to miss. So Jenifer, thank you again. And we hope everybody has a great week. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for joining me today. Thank you.